So here we go. All right, I'm pretty excited about tonight. So basically, tonight, what I want to be talking about is I'm going to be going over a diet. And so this is basically a preview of what we're going to be covering during our 6 week, energy boot camp coaching program. So this is going to give you an idea of, how I look at diet. And so understand, like, when I came up with this concept of beer diet project, it was basically the way that I look at diet, the way that I look at food is very different than anyone that I know. Okay. And so today I want to give you like a little bit of a taste of, what that looks like, but also maybe to help clear up some, I guess, some, I don't want to say myths, but a lot of people like struggle with changing their diets. They feel like they've tried everything from paleo, keto, going organic and cutting out sugar, grains, and dairy and all these other stuff, and they just don't seem to get better. And so hopefully with what I shared today, it will share some, will shed some light. So let me see who is live here. And Cindy, how's it going? So glad you made it. All right. So let me start out by sharing a little bit of, my background, my story, because I believe this is going to really help you understand how I figured this out, how it made sense to me to begin with. So rewind back to 2012. Here I am brewing beer, teaching how to brew beer, and I have no idea what I'm doing to my health. I'm just eating whatever, whatever's tasty. At the time, a lot of pizza, a lot of hot wings, a lot of, basically going to breweries and drinking a lot of beer. And that's basically where I was. And it got to a point where I just wasn't feeling good. And just about anything that I ate was starting to, give me different kind of reactions, allergic reactions. And it started getting to the point where I would eat food and then my belly will kind of like begin to blow up. And when I started to notice that, at the time, like I said, didn't know anything that, that I know now, at least not like hadn't made like that connection. But I basically, started to change out my diet, and I started to say, okay, I'm not going to be eating, so much pizza, not going to be ordering dessert, which was something that I always would do. I had a sweet tooth. And so I figured, what, if I cut out beer and if I start eating more salads, that's healthy, right? So I'm going to start to, lose weight again and feel a little bit better. Well, I did that, and it turned out that I would eat a salad and still my belly will kind of like blow up, and I'd be, gassy and I didn't know what was going on, right? And I gave it, a few weeks, and it was still like nothing was going on. That's when I started to, kind of worry. And, shortly after, that's when a lot of these things started happening, where I was just tired all the time. My hair started falling off. I had brain fog, and I was just feeling like miserable this whole time. And I had yet to make a connection. Fast forward, I started to learn a little bit more about, gut issues. And my epiphany came when I realized that 80% of your immune system is your gut. And I realized that, when they say 80% of your immune system, they're talking about your gut microbiome. And when they say your gut microbiome, what they are referring to is probiotics, and probiotics are basically yeast and bacteria. So once I heard that part and I started to dig in a little bit more and realize that, hey, there's the probability that I have some bad bacteria, some bad yeast, potentially a parasite, virus, or some other, type of infection. That's when my brewer brain kicked in, because when I heard the moment, hey, you may have yeast overgrowth, this is where all of a sudden, for those of you who don't know, like I said, I used to teach how to brew beer. So I wrote a book on how to brew beer. I have training programs that teach how to brew beer, where I go really in depth into everything that surrounds, brewing beer, which is essentially growing yeast and bacteria in the case of sour beer, or in the case of kombucha, which is a fermented beverage that's brewed with a SCOBY. SCOBY stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. So essentially what I started to realize, I essentially started to take information that I picked up from brewing books, right? This is a book on yeast for brewing purposes. It's not a book on health. Yet, when you read books like this that teach you about growing yeast and fermenting, here's another one, The Science of Beer Froth, right? So this is all about the the science, and this is a tough read. This is a very technical book, but it goes into like how froth, basically the foam, how it is all created. And basically what you learn from this kind of stuff is that essentially what yeast and bacteria do is they eat sugar and then they make nutrients out of it. So in the case of beer, you'd have yeast that eat the sugar from barley grains or wheat grains, and they make beer out of it. And in the process, they make things like, the foam in the beer, they make vitamins and all kinds of other things. And that's when I realized, whoa, that's exactly what's going on with me, right? This is why I was low in certain vitamins. That's why my body was not making hormones. It was because my gut flora was damaged, and like there was an imbalance there, right? So now I had to go figure out, how do I fix that? Okay, and so the way that I started to look at food, once I made all of those connections and I understood that, hey, gut health is nothing more than treating your gut kind of like a fermentation vessel, kind of like the way you would when you brew beer, right? If you have autoimmune conditions, so you have bad bacteria, yeast overgrowth, parasite, or whatever, basically you got to think of that as a spoiled batch of beer. Whenever you have a spoiled batch of beer in the brewery setting, you don't brew more beer in that same fermenter because it's already contaminated, right? You have to dump it out, you have to clean, and you have to sanitize. That's essentially what I've done. That's essentially what we're going to be going through during Energy Bootcamp, is how do you clean and sanitize your equipment? Because you cannot grow healthy bacteria in a toxic environment. So you're going to see that our focus is essentially going to be in detoxing the body and cleaning out the body, because that's what's going to prepare you to restructure your gut microbiome. So I'm excited to share with you today. So hopefully with this backstory, it makes sense, to you, why I think of food in such a different way. And you're going to see me, as I break down a diet, I'm going to point out like different things. And so for this specific session, I'm not going to be focusing too much on the detoxing side, but more on, the beginning phase. So this is for everyone that's going to be going through Energy Bootcamp. Like, this is what you want to be looking at. This is what I'm going to be pointing out. This is the kind of stuff that I want you to be taking notes on, and see how some of the things I'm going to point out here, how does that apply to you right now? Because this is basically the first phase, and you're going to see how my diet changed depending on like which phase I was. So hopefully all of that makes sense. Before I get started, let me check in with you guys here on Facebook. See, Christina, you're on here. Welcome. Awesome. I'm excited for you guys. Thank you for being here. So let me go ahead and share my screen now, and we'll get going with this with this diet thing. Here we go. All right, so you should be able to see my screen now. And this diet was sent out to me, and one of the things that I want to point out when it comes to diet is, when you look at this diet, again, when I first started, I would look at this diet and I would say there's nothing wrong with this. Okay, it's totally normal. I'm pretty sure that there may have been a day where I ate exactly the same thing and, thought really nothing of it, right? Because when you don't understand how your gut microbiome works, you don't really see some of the things that I see. So, so you understand what I do when I look at a diet, I want you guys to remember that I look at everything through the eyes of the brewing process And what has helped me the most is this little diagram right here. And, I repeat it over and over because number one, it helps me remember this and it helps me internalize it. And I wish the same for you, to remind you that your gut is just like the root system of a tree. And what makes this healthy is the quality of water. Okay, there's quantity and then there's quality of water. So there's both. So there's the water, there's minerals, there's the pH, right? The pH of the soil, the pH of the water that you use to water this. Same thing in your gut, the pH of your gut, all of that is affected. The temperature, right? If it's if it's too cold, a tree won't grow. If it's too hot, it'll burn, right? And your body is the same. If your body starts to drop in temperature, which, if you're not producing hormones, then chances are your body temperature is down a couple degrees. That has an effect on your digestive system. Okay. And again, this is all things that I looked at in brewing beer. There's probiotics, right? So this is basically what I looked. This is the overall diagram. And it starts out with, as a brewer, you look at a grain, barley or wheat. How does that turn into grass? How does that sprout? All of this, right water, right minerals, right pH, right temperature. And then with probiotics, we kind of hijack this process of sprouting and we use the ingredients to basically make beer. That's basically what we do. That's why this stuff makes sense to me and it's second nature to me. So as I look at a diet like this, here's a couple things that I can see right away. So understanding the position of, this person here. So I usually eat brunch around 10 a.m. So I wish I knew exactly what time the dinner was here, but one of the things that comes out here is one of the things that I warn people off when they were first starting out, because, oftentimes I talk about one of the best tools for cleaning up your gut is fasting, right? So if you're eating breakfast a little bit later than, than you should, which puts you into a fasted state, part of it is good because it's cleaning your gut. What's not good is that when you're starting out, you have to understand that the reason why you're having digestive issues, the reason why you're having a lot of these problems is because of a toxic gut. And if you have a toxic gut, if you begin to fast, there's a lot of toxic waste in your body, and that's going to basically put a heavy load of toxic waste trying to be flushed out from the body. And that's going to essentially put a load on your liver, right? So if you're starting out, fasting is not really a good idea until you detox your liver, right? So in our energy bootcamp coaching program, this is one of the reasons why we're going to be starting out with Ayurvedic herbs that are specifically targeting the liver to clean it up. Because if we are to detox your gut, the only way you're going to be able to do that, following some of the detoxing protocols that I'm going to be sharing with you, is only going to be possible if your liver is clean first. Okay, first is the liver. So this is where you have to understand the order of events that I followed, so that what I did, is done in a safe way, and not only just safe, but effective, right? Because, what happens is, if your liver, think of your liver like a filter, or it's like basically your oil filter, just like a car. Every 3,000 or 5,000 miles, you have to get a oil change, right? When you get an oil change, you get a filter replacement because the filter gets dirty. Well, your liver is the same, right? You're going to change the oil in the liver, and you got to clean it up because it gets clogged. And once it gets clogged, the problem is that if you try to detox, and if your liver is already too dirty and clogs, all of that toxic waste that is trying to leave the body ends up in your bloodstream, and now it's all over your body. Okay, so you actually end up in a worse position than when you started. So that's the first emphasis that I want to point out here, right? So this is something that someone who doesn't understand the body the way that I'm showing you here is going about their day and not really thinking much about this kind of stuff. So in the beginning, right, you don't want to be fasting, right? You want to be cleaning up your liver first, and you want to be, eating food, which, is kind of like counter, it goes kind of like against of, like what I personally do. Like I fast practically all day. And, so people hear me say that and they're like, oh, well, if he does that, I'm going to go try that. Well, I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Like I've been doing this stuff for about 8 years. What I do now is not where I started. Okay. And that's important for me to point out, for me to emphasize and help you understand that what I do currently is not where I started. And so I want you to understand like the beginning phases, like what I had to go through. These are the things that I personally had to go through. And it's the lessons that I've learned over the last 8 years or so. So let's keep going. So in this case, breakfast here consists of 2 fried eggs with coconut oil and a bit of salt. All right, like I said, I'm going to be diving really deep into all of this. I think it's important for you to know like the position here is, low vitamin D. And I'm just going to use myself as an example here because I was in the same exact position as this person, which was, I was low in vitamin D, which, low vitamin D is also what is kind of like at the root cause of low hormone production, which in my case was low testosterone. Testosterone. All right. So here's the important thing, right? As you start going through this program, the very first thing that I always have people do is mineralize and raise your vitamin D levels. Okay. And the reason why I want you to understand that nothing else that I share works unless you have these in place is because the way that your body uptakes nutrients, right? This is where the tree analogy really comes into play. A lot of people understand the whole water and minerals, but they don't understand how does vitamin D apply to all of this. Well, if you look at a tree, a tree grows because of sunshine. If you don't have sunlight, right, that's where you get vitamin D from. A plant is not going to grow, right? It's not going to bear fruit. It's not going to do anything. And in the body, it's the same thing. Like one of the reasons why we need vitamin D is because that's how we grow. That's how we regenerate. That's how we produce energy, right? I think of vitamin D as like the charge that we get inside every cell of our body that, I think of it like a battery in a way. And what's important to understand about vitamin D is that vitamin D allows the body to uptake calcium, right? And it's the reason why without vitamin D and vitamin A for that matter, a lot of people start to experience bone decay, right? So people that have like arthritis kind of stuff, fibromyalgia and all these other things, like this is basically where that comes from. It's, they're low in vitamin D, which, there's 4 vitamins that are key for this. It's vitamins A, D, E, and K. And what's special about these vitamins is that they are fat soluble. Okay, so in the beginning phase, one of the most important things that you're going to have to look at is what is your fat intake like? Are you eating enough healthy fats, right? So over the next 6 weeks, you're going to hear me like, this is what I'm going to be pointing out is what kind of fats are you eating? Because you got to be able to identify what are bad fats and what are good fats. Because the more healthy fats you include into your diet, the easier it is going to be for your body to uptake vitamins A, D, E, and K, right? And so the beginning part of this program is you got to hydrate, mineralize, and boost your vitamin D, right? So if you start drinking water, you start mineralizing and you're taking vitamin D, but you're not adding good, healthy fats into your diet, you're not going to progress. But if you start adding healthy fats into your diet, then you are going to be uptaking vitamin D. And once you're able to uptake vitamin D, which allows you to uptake calcium, calcium is what regulates pH. Okay, this is what we use in the brewery setting, right? If I wanted to mess with pH, if I needed to, brew, say, for example, a darker beer, I needed to alkalize, the water, in the mash. So I would add calcium carbonate. If I wanted to make it a little more acidic, in the case of a lighter beer that doesn't have too much acidity, I will add gypsum salt, which is, a calcium based salt that lowers the pH, right? So calcium is basically what we use to play with our pH. And I believe that our bodies regulate pH using calcium. So if your vitamin D levels are low, this is what makes your body acidic. Okay, your body loses that ability to pick up calcium and use it to regulate its own pH. This is one of the ways that I envision it, right, happening. This is how I see the world. This is, the world through my eyes, if you will. And so as I begin to look at, in the beginning, this seems okay, right? Because you got eggs, you got coconut oil. Coconut oil is a good, healthy fat. And then there's a little bit of salt, right? So on the surface level, this looks good. But now the way that I look at diet, this is where it changes, is that now I start to question, what kind of eggs are you eating? What kind of coconut oil are you eating? What kind of type, what type of salt are you using, right? If you're using conventional eggs, if you look up how conventional eggs are made, right? You have basically a, chicken coop, and you have practically all these hens laying eggs, and they never leave this chicken coop. And their diets are usually grain fed, and that grain is usually not good grain. Okay, it's not the type of grain, right? If you're trying to cut out grain from your diet, guess what? If you're eating eggs that are conventional, you're getting the stuff that you're trying to get rid of by cutting out grain, gluten, and some of these other foods from your diet, right? These are grains that are grown with pesticides, they're grown with all kinds of things. And so if you look at the health of these chickens, they're not healthy chickens, which means that the eggs that they're producing are not good eggs. They don't have nutrients, they don't have minerals, they don't have any of the stuff that you're looking for. So this is one way that you can start to optimize your diet. Right? You have what's known as conventional eggs. And then from there, a step up from there is cage free. Cage free is just kind of like, these guys learning that, hey, the market knows that we don't treat these chickens good, so we're going to call them cage free, meaning we let them out of the chicken coop. But literally they just open it up and they only have like, I think it's like 1 or 3 feet, or it's something small, ridiculously small, to where these chickens are not really getting any nutrition outside of the cages. And the whole reason why you're looking for pasture raised, free range, is because these chickens are supposed to roam in acres of land where they eat their normal diet, which includes grass, bugs, and all kinds of things. That's what makes them healthy. If the chicken is healthy, you got to think about what they eat. They have a microbiome. If they're eating the grain that affects our microbiome, right, these chickens are going to have just as bad of a microbiome, and all of their diseases are going to be passed down to you because of the eggs that you're eating, right? When you get pasture raised, free range eggs, now you're eating food from a healthy chicken, because they're roaming around, and the grass that they're eating is usually in good soil that has, good quality water, minerals, pH, temperature, and probiotics from the stuff that they're all eating, right? So that's basically one way that you can improve there. Coconut oil, same thing, right? You have expeller press, you have cold press. The coconut oil that I use is centrifuged, and you have to look at the source. Where does it come from? Because not all coconuts are the same, right? So the ones that I get, they come from, I believe, Philippines, and this is like good coconut, good quality, coconut oil. Same reason. If the coconut doesn't grow in an area where it's native, it basically means that it was grown using some sort of fertilizer, and it doesn't have like all the minerals and the stuff that you're looking for, out of that coconut oil, right? So just looking at the source is basically one way that you can start to improve your diet. Salt. This is one that Most people have no idea, but you go to restaurants, you go practically everywhere, and you have that fine salt that's like the Morton's brand kind of thing. Most people don't know, but that salt is toxic. It has absolutely no minerals. As a matter of fact, if you want to think of what that salt is they take regular salt, they remove the minerals, and then they sell you those minerals. And the salt apart, the salt has no nutrients, but they got to do something with it, right? It's another source of revenue for some of these companies. You got to understand that food is an industry, okay? And so if you're using salt that has no minerals, why do you think I have people hydrate, drink water, and add minerals to their diet? It's because I know that food is lacking minerals, right? And so when it comes to salt, for cooking purposes, I use Celtic sea salt. And if you look at the packaging, you're going to see that it has minerals, right? That's why it looks, it's coarse and it's a dark gray kind of color. And personally, I think it tastes better, right? And then there's pink Himalayan salt, which is another salt that I use, which again, it has all 82 plus minerals that our body needs. Minerals are the conductive material, right? If you want to get energy, right, it's one thing to get energy, right? Your cells make the energy, it's just like a battery. Well, the minerals are the conductors, right? So it's like a copper wire that connects your electronic equipment. That's what conducts electricity. That's basically what allows you to actually use the energy that you produce. So it's on one hand, you got to produce the energy. On the other hand, you got to be able to use it. Minerals is how you produce it. And what happens is that if you're eating salt that is devoid of minerals, the way that your body is going to process that is going to have to flush it out, and it's going to require you to use your body water, which is water and minerals. And if you're using that to flush out food, that demineralizes you, it dehydrates you, right? So you kind of start to see how, if you are eating this day in and day out and you're using this type of salt, right, look at the habits, right? If you're not drinking enough water and if you're not adding minerals to it, you're dehydrating. On top of that, if you're eating bad salt and bad foods, that's dehydrating you, right? So you kind of start to see how this is starting to dehydrate your body. What happens if you don't water a tree, right? The leaves start to fall off, you start to get holes, they start to wilt. Does that sound familiar? My hair was starting to fall off. The problem is not at the leaf, it's at the root. It was not hydrated. The problem was not at my hair, right? It's not that I had something going on in my head. No, my gut was dehydrated. It was demineralized. It was lacking vitamin D, right? So the pH wasn't right. That's basically what was happening. And you can start to see, as I uncover this, how all of a sudden, like, you look at food and it just makes sense, right? So let's keep going, because I can continue to break this down, but I want to give you, like, the basics. And by the way, this may be information overload. Don't worry, because when we go through Energy Bootcamp, I'm going to give you like single action steps. But I just want you to see this so that you learn, you understand, and you start to look for things like this. I mentioned the important part of this phase is to focus on vitamins A, D, E, and K, right? Fermented cod liver oil gives you vitamins A and D. Vitamins E and K you get, or I get, primarily from avocados, right? And there's other sources, but this is my favorite one for E and K, and that's how I cover the whole spectrum. We mentioned too that, fat soluble is, it's, these vitamins are fat soluble, so you need good healthy fat. So if you were to just eat this, right, and suppose that this is pasture raised, so that's good. Suppose this is centrifuge, so that's good. And suppose that this is Celtic sea salt, now you're good, right? So that's one change that you can make. And here's what you got to start to worry about then. Potatoes a starch, right? When you start to understand how the body digests food, it's kind of gets a little bit easier to plan out your meals, because you start to understand now that, hey, starch requires a more alkaline pH. That's why you have your saliva, your mouth is a little bit more alkaline compared to your stomach. Your stomach is acidic because protein requires an acidic environment, to be digested. Fats require an environment that is low in fermentable carbohydrates. And if you look at the way that, for example, cod liver oil, the way that it's made, the way that it's fermented is using a salty brine-like solution. So you need low fermentables, low fermentable carbohydrates, and more salt. That's why people that go on a ketogenic diet, they require more salt and more water in their diet, right? And that's why a lot of people notice big differences when they go keto. It's because they're essentially providing an environment for these vitamins to be digested and uptaken by the body, right? So in this case, eating potato is essentially a mistake, right? Because it's starch, and that's going to inhibit digestion of coconut oil, and it's not going to allow you to uptake vitamin D, as usual. And at this phase, like, I don't have people cut out things from their diet, but I can just say, hey, if instead of eating it with breakfast here, what if you move this potato to dinner time, or maybe as a snack here for lunch, right? Because that way in the morning you are more in a ketogenic type of meal and diet. Now you can take your fermented cod liver oil. Now that's going to allow your body to actually uptake that vitamin. So can you see how, like, that little tweak alone right there can have a major impact? If you do this every single day, this is how this stuff works. So, again, seasoning with salt. Again, same thing. Question the salt, and then a side of organic mixed greens. So let me pause here for a second and check in with you guys and see how this is, see if this is resonating, see if you guys are making sense of this, because I know you guys are going to be going, you guys are going to be going through this. So Christina, I just need to say today was a wonderful day. I felt good all day long. Dehydration minerals is wonderful. I love it. Guys, this makes me so happy, by the way, reading your guys' comments like this. This is why I do this. Like, I have no idea how else to explain it, but it brings me so much joy. So thank you, Christina, for sharing that. Thank you, Yvette, for sharing your story with you and your mom. That was absolutely beautiful. I love it. Cindy, very informative. Beer brewing background is interesting. It's amazing. Like, I still laugh at how I actually know more about health because of brewing beer compared to a lot of doctors. So, all right, let's keep going and learn a little bit more here. All right, so mixed greens. So in this case, greens, I think would be okay. But again, this is where a lot of people get confused. And this is where I'm going to say, well, it's not so much that people struggle, but here's what you have to understand. Mixed greens, you have fiber. Okay, and so the question is fiber good for you or not? The answer is yes and no. The reason why is because fiber is food for bacteria, both good and bad. So to properly answer this question, is fiber good for you? What you have to ask yourself is, what's living in your gut? If you have bad bacteria, if you have yeast overgrowth, if you have like stuff that is not supposed to be there, when you eat fiber, that's food for them. That's one thing that can cause bloating, gas, all that kind of stuff. Remember, I switched from whatever diet I was on, standard American diet, to eating salads, thinking like, hey, I'm just going to eat vegetables. That's good, right? That's healthy. Yet my belly was still blowing up. It's because I was feeding fiber to my gut, and my gut had unwanted bacteria and yeast overgrowth. When I talk about yeast, remember, there's good yeast. Brewer's yeast is good yeast. That makes B vitamins, right? You don't confuse these, that with bad yeast. Bad yeast is a strain like yeast candida or yeast albicans. Those are, and there's 1,000 of these bad yeast varieties, both good and bad. If you have the bad kind, they're going to eat, and just like every other yeast, they're going to eat food and they produce gas, right? That's where that blowing up feeling comes from. It's from, these creatures that live in your gut. So is fiber good? Yes or no? What lives in your gut? So at this point, this is the kind of stuff that you want to be looking at. And this is what starts to tell me, right? This is why I'm going to be working with people one-on-one, is because if you're able to eat greens and you don't experience this, this gas buildup, it starts to tell me what your microbiome is like. It starts to give me an idea of what we're working with, right? This is the kind of stuff that I see, that I have no idea how I learned this, other than it's just intuition based on, what I know about yeast and bacteria, parasites, and like everything I'm learning about the microbiome. But this is the kind of stuff that I would, look and see, like, hey, if you're eating greens and you feel fine, keep doing it. If you start, if you take them away and you all of a sudden notice an improvement, that gives me a clue, right? That tells me, okay, this is what we're going to be doing when we detox your gut, right? That's why this part is important. And this is why I need you guys to document everything that you do, all the changes. Whatever change that you make, you got to document and let me know. It's like, hey, this helped, or, this didn't help, kind of thing, right? So hopefully that made sense. And here we could get to the good part, right? So some people start to think, okay, you start to understand that if your gut has bad bacteria, yeast overgrowth, now all of a sudden it makes sense why you want to cut out grains, right? Because grains is basically starch, and starch essentially turns into sugar. And what do we know about yeast? They eat sugar, right? So this is why all of a sudden it makes sense. Why people tell you, like, oh, you got to cut out grains, you got to cut out sugar, you got to cut out dairy, right? Dairy also has sugar. Lactose is a sugar. And so this is where that comes from, right? That's why it makes sense to an extent. And so what people start to think is like, oh, well, maybe I should go ketogenic. And what's a ketogenic diet like, right? A lot of people, there's so many variations of the ketogenic diet. There's dirty keto, there's plant-based keto, there's the carnivore diet, there's all kinds of, different diets out there that can be considered ketogenic. But most people will basically kind of think like, okay, it's primarily fats and protein. All right, but this is where it gets a little bit complicated. And this is where people struggle, right? They go keto and they're like, hey, I tried keto and, it didn't work. I still felt, that gas and bloating and stuff going on. Well, this is where we kind of go back to, okay, what's the source? Was this chicken raised properly? Was it fed grains? Because if it was, that kind of gives you a clue. If it was pasture raised and it was good, that is an improvement. But here's the thing. This is what a lot of people don't know or don't understand about protein, is that there is the ability for protein to turn into sugar. That's called gluconeogenesis. So essentially, and this is what, you can hear people talk about this in the keto community. Basically what it's saying is like, hey, you're supposed to eat primarily fats. If you eat too much protein, your body can only uptake so much protein. The rest turns into sugar via this gluconeogenesis process. And so essentially what this is saying is that even if you cut out sugar, if you overdo your protein, you can still end up with sugar in your diet. And sugar kicks you out of ketosis, and sugar will feed the bad bacteria and yeast. So you can kind of see how tricky this can get, right? It's not good enough to cut out grains. It's not good enough to cut out starch. It's not good enough to cut out sugar, right? And so what we're going to be doing over the next 6 weeks is I'm going to be guiding you and pointing you to like, okay, number one, making sure that you're not eating too much protein, but also tweaking your foods. And everyone's going to be, a little bit more individual. And you guys will get to learn from each other, because I think that as you see me breaking down someone else's diet, you start to see things that, maybe you didn't see before within your own diet, but also start to get some ideas of things that you can potentially begin to do. Garlic, I won't get into this one too much right now. I mean, there are a lot of benefits to garlic, detoxifying effects, but there's also a lot of anti-nutrient things that I love garlic, by the way, and garlic bread and all that kind of stuff. Like, trust me, I love it. But at the same time, I don't eat it too much because of some of the anti-nutrients and toxicity on it. But that's a topic for a different day. Coconut oil, I think we covered. Salt, we covered. Stir fry with cabbage and yellow onion. So at this stage, you have, stir fry. I don't know what oil was used, right? If it was coconut oil, then that's good. But one of the things I want to be pointing out is, oils are very important because, again, if you're working with vitamins A, D, E, and K, the type of oils that you use in your diet are super important. The type of fats that you use in your diet are very important. I know that a lot of people don't know or don't realize that vegetable oils are a big no-no. They're not, I mean, well, especially like if they're corn, soy, canola, safflower, some of these oils, like the grains that they're made off, like they're not good. They have a lot of polyunsaturated fats, omega-6, which are basically hard to digest fats. You're looking for healthy fats like coconut oil, avocado. Avocado oil is good. Hemp seeds, hemp oil. Olive oil is a tricky one. Okay, and olive oil is tricky because olive oil can be a good oil if and only if the olives are fully ripened. And again, this is an industry, so you have to look at, one way that olive oil manufacturers can lower the cost of their olive oil is by pulling their olives before they're fully ripened. And so that removes a lot of the benefits, and it makes it so that it oxidizes more. And that's the other thing that you have to look at is packaging, right? If the olive oil is not in a glass bottle, if it's in a plastic bottle, that can allow oxygen in and it basically starts to oxidize, right? If it's not a dark bottle, the oils can actually go rancid due to it being exposed to light. Again, these are things that a lot of people don't know or don't understand. The reason why I know this, aside from reading about it, is in brewing beer, right? It's another lesson that brewing beer taught me. Have you ever noticed that all beers come in a dark brown bottle? Okay. The exceptions to that are, beers like, gosh, I got to say this word now, but Corona or Heineken, or Sol, whatever these other brands are. That's because the dark color in the bottle protects the oils in the hops from being basically exposed to sunlight, and that's what protects them from oxidizing and going rancid. Oils like olive oil and others are the same. That's why you got to look for glass bottles and make sure that they are dark. Okay, if you're getting olive oil and it's in a clear glass bottle, that's no good. If it's in a plastic bottle, that's no good, right? So all these little things start to make a difference, because if the oil is not good, the oil is basically your carrier for these vitamins, right? So if you're not getting good oils, if you're not getting good healthy fats, your body's not going to be uptaking these vitamins as well. So that's the importance there on the stir fry. And then we have cabbage and yellow onions, which, we'll go back to what's the source. Is it conventional or is it organic, right? Because if it grows in an organic soil, that means that it was grown in good quality water, minerals, pH, temperature, bacteria, all that kind of stuff. If it was conventional, it doesn't have all of this. And not only that, they use fertilizers, which are NPK. That's only 3 minerals, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And as you already know, we need 82 plus minerals, right? So if you're eating this stuff from conventional, this is another way that you get demineralized. You can't even make sauerkraut, right? Sauerkraut is basically fermented cabbage, right? You can't make it using conventional because it's full of pesticides, herbicides and other things that kill bacteria in the soil so that this can kind of grow. All right, this is kind of like one of those science discoveries that doesn't exactly help us, humanity, because they figured out, hey, we can grow food using only 3 minerals, but unfortunately that's not healthy food. But hey, we can grow it and it's cheap, and that's why they can sell it for much cheaper than organic, right? But now you're being demineralized. And if you're not aware of this stuff, remember, the whole reason why I start out with a habit of drinking water and adding minerals is because I understand that a lot of people are demineralized. And these are, look at all the ways: bath salt, potatoes, that's starch. How do you brew beer? You basically combine the starch and grains and add water and minerals. How does your body digest potato, which is starch? You need water and minerals, right? If the potato doesn't have it, right, if which more than likely it doesn't, because the only potatoes that are mineralized are the Peruvian papas, right, which you can only get down in the Andes of Peru. Otherwise, these are hybridized versions. These lack minerals, so these foods demineralize you, right? And now we're getting into cabbage and onions. We go back to the question of fiber, right? These have fiber, right? If your gut right now has gut issues, all of these foods, even though they could be healthy if they were organic, you still have to worry about fiber, right? So this is the kind of stuff that we have to navigate, and this is why, like, everyone's going to be different. I'm going to have to be looking at what you're eating, right? And it's tricky, right? I have to look at it and think about, okay, what's something that we can change? How can we rearrange this? How can we start to change this out to start to build up, clean up your gut first of all, and then start to build up your microbiome? That's basically why, 6 weeks is what I'm thinking. Hopefully that we can make some big progress doing this, because you can see this gets detailed. So those ingredients are all conventional items. And then side of white rice, again, rice, basically starch, which turns into sugar. Snacks during the day will consist of banana, apple with organic peanut butter. So again, you got sugar here, you got sugar here. And that's not to say that you can't eat sugar, right? I mean, there are ways to use sugar, but this phase right now, when you're starting out, you got to understand all the things that affect what you're trying to do, which initially the number one focus that everyone should have is to mineralize and boost their vitamin D levels, right? Once you fix your gut and do everything else, like right now, I can eat sugar, I can eat, bananas, I can eat apples, I can eat berries, I can eat whatever I want. But when I first started out, I just wasn't able to, because sugar will feed the yeast and bacteria, the bad yeast and bacteria. I mean, sure, it also feeds the good, but if you have autoimmune conditions, that's the problem. Is that that's what I think it's, here's how I visualize it: is once the amount of bad bacteria overcomes the amount of good bacteria, that's when shit hits the fan, to put it in direct words. And essentially what happens then is, you try to eat something healthy, say so you're eating an apple and it's organic. Problem is that now you have more bad bacteria than good bacteria. Now your immune system's compromised. Basically what that means is, imagine like your gut is a village and you have the bad guys overpopulate and they take over. So, there's food that hits your gut. They basically push all of your probiotics aside and say, hey, you're not eating, we're eating first. And if there's anything left over, which there's not going to be, then they will eat. And this is what puts you into that vicious cycle of you're eating food, you're not getting nutrients, and the bad bacteria steal the nutrients and they produce toxic waste. All that toxicity ends up in your body. You start to accumulate body fat, because body fat is used in the body to protect you from the toxic waste that is coming from your gut, right? So this is why what we want to do is we want to reduce the amount of bad bacteria and start to increase the amount of good bacteria, because that reduces the amount of toxic waste coming out of your gut. And that basically reduces the need for body fat in your body. Okay, this is basically what I did. This is how I see it happening. This is how this is basically the journey that I had to go through. And then last here, raw organic carrots. Okay, so that's a cool one. So carrots, sure, there's the sugar component of it, but most importantly, carrots are supposed to have vitamin A, right? But they don't have vitamin A. What they have is beta carotene. So how does beta carotene turn into vitamin A? The answer is fermentation. It's basically yeast and bacteria as your probiotics. That's what this process is. Once the sugar, right, a carbohydrate is basically a chain of sugar, right? That's a starch. It's, every link is a sugar. Digestion is basically you cut each, you cut it down into smaller components, right? So starch becomes, a complex sugar like a dextrin kind of thing, right? And then you can break that down even further, right? So digestion is this process of continually breaking it down until you get to a single link, which is basically what glucose is. It's the smallest component of sugar, right? So probiotics, yeast, and bacteria, they not only digest, but once it gets into glucose, a continuation of this breaking down, that's what fermentation is. And in that process, that's when you take, if the glucose, this is kind of like explaining also the difference between a good sugar and a bad sugar, right? A good sugar will have nutrients, it will have minerals. And because it has those minerals, the word vitamin is basically a vital mineral. That's basically where that word comes from. It's a vital mineral, right? So a vitamin, it's that what that is. So if you're eating sugars, right? If this apple is conventional and it doesn't have minerals, right? If this carrot is conventional and doesn't have minerals, you don't have the raw materials to make the vitamin. But if it's organic, then you're able to make the vitamin. But now we have the other component is that if you're eating carrots, right? When you're eating carrots, you're not eating vitamin A, you're eating beta carotene, which means that you need to have the probiotics in your gut to turn beta carotene into vitamin A. And as as we already know, if you have autoimmune conditions, that doesn't happen. And that's why, people that take vitamins and all these other supplements, they don't uptake them. It's because they don't have the right probiotics in their gut and they have a lot of bad bacteria, which will steal the nutrients anyways. And so it's not just looking at the source of food, it's looking at what lives in your gut. And then this is where the other component comes in, where, if you were to ferment the carrot, which you can do it by, making, for example, kimchi. Kimchi is very similar to sauerkraut. It's fermented cabbage with fermented carrots. That process of fermentation is what gives you vitamin A, right? So even if you don't have the right probiotics, when you eat kimchi, it has carrots, but they've already been digested and they've already had the minerals turn into vitamin A. So that food goes into your gut and that food has already been digested. So the bad bacteria can't digest it because it's already been digested. Probiotics don't need to digest it because it's already been digested. So your body just basically uptakes it. And now you have vitamin A. This is where and why I talk about fermented cod liver oil, right? A lot of people will tell me, it's like, well, I'm already taking cod liver oil. First question I ask is it fermented? If it's not, this is what's happening. You're taking in cod liver oil, the bad bacteria eats it, makes you toxic, steals your nutrients, and you don't get anything out of it. When you take fermented cod liver oil, there's nothing left to digest or ferment, and the cod liver oil has already turned into vitamins A and D, and your body just uptakes it. So that's basically what's going on. So you can kind of see how all of this, comes together. And as you start to understand why some of these things happen and how they happen, you start to just, make better choices. You kind of start to see a path and you start to see light at the end of the tunnel. So let me know if all of this made sense. Let me go back and see here. All right. I don't know if these comments are updating, but that's practically all that I have, that I wanted to share with you today. Like I said, we're going to be doing this for about 6 weeks, and there's a lot, there's going to be a group of people. So obviously I'm going to have to, compress a lot of this information. And so I just wanted to give you a taste of, what we're going to be doing. You can see how we're going to take, for those of you who participated, by the way, thank you so much, first of all. But you're going to see how now we're going to take what we just learned, which is, you hydrated, you've been doing the vitamin D. Now you're going to start to see how changing your diet and making these little tweaks, how it's going to basically stack on top of what you're already doing and just going to make it better, right? We're going to start to detox the liver and understand that your liver is what digests a lot of your fats. And so if you're able to digest fat better, this is what's going to allow you to uptake vitamin D even better, right? So you can kind of see the progression of how, like, why, I had to like think through a lot of this to be able to figure out, what goes first, why should we do it, first, and then what will go next, right? So we want to really detox the liver, make sure that you're digesting fats properly, so your body's uptaking all that vitamin D. That's going to start to get the wheels turning, right? Get your digestion working a little bit better. Your sleep is going to start to improve, and all these things are going to start to happen. Then we can go and detox. And detoxing is the hard work. Okay, that's going to be the hard work, and it oftentimes is going to seem like it's going to undo a lot of the stuff that you did. But that's why it's important for you to like really, really understand and really get into that routine of strengthening your body through vitamin D and minerals, because when you go to detox, it's going to undo it. And so you have to like learn and be intuitive, because if you start to detox too fast, you have to be willing and able to take a step back and go back and focus on what worked in the beginning, which was water, minerals, vitamin D, build up again until you're able to start detoxing again. And then you just basically play back and forth, detox your liver, you detox your gut, you go back and forth. And as you clean out your body and you start to clean up your gut, your bad bacteria and all that stuff is going to basically, the amount of bad bacteria is going to come down. And that's going to give us an environment where we can start to go in and start growing probiotics and moving on to the last phase, which is where we go and optimize the microbiome. So I'm super excited for everyone who is already signed up to go through Energy Bootcamp, our coaching program. I'm excited for you guys. So that's all that I've got for today. So if you guys have any questions, let's see here. Cindy, a perspective I wasn't aware of. You gave a brilliant class. Thank you for the knowledge. That is awesome. Thank you. But if you guys don't have any other questions, then that's all that I've got for today. Those of you who are participating, I'll be sending you messages, between, tomorrow and then Saturday, you'll have your first assignment. Our first group coaching call will be on Sunday. So stay tuned for a message based on that. And that's it. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening. And I will be talking to you guys later. See you, everyone.